So welcome to this Law for Community Worker webinar about Legal Aid New South Wales services for clients with disability. We'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands from which we are broadcasting today. I'm broadcasting from the lands of the Widjabul people of the Bundjalung Nation. We pay our respect to the elders of the land, both past and present, and we also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining the live broadcast or watching the recording. So today's webinar is being held to mark the International Day of People with Disability and is about Legal Aid New South Wales services for clients with disability. My name is Bridget Barker and I work in the Community Legal Education branch at Legal Aid New South Wales. The session will be an hour and we've allowed an extra 15 minutes in case we need that time for questions. After the webinar, you will receive an evaluation survey, and we really appreciate any feedback we receive, and we do take it into account in our planning for the next year. You'll also receive an email with information about any resources or contact details that we talk about in today's webinar. So I'll hand over to your presenters. Firstly, you'll hear from Stacey from the NDIS team, and then secondly, you'll hear from Danny from Your Story Disability Legal Support. Welcome, Stacey and Danny.
Thanks, Bridget. I too would like to acknowledge that I'm on unceded Gadigal land and pay my respect to elders past and present. As Bridget said, I am in the NDIS team. We're the NDIS and Social Security Specialist team, and we're based in the head office in Central Sydney. I thought today it would be best to talk a little bit about us, what we do, and then about the common legal issues that we help with and what the legislation says. And so I guess the two main types of law that we help with NDIS is access matters, which is when a person is trying to access the NDIS and has been declined. So we help with reviews of those decisions, and then supports matters, which are about the supports that are included in a participant's plan and reviews of those when a participant isn't happy with those supports. And so there are 3 access criteria to becoming a participant of the NDIS. A person has to be under 65 years old when they apply for the NDIS, but then once they have been accepted as a participant, they then receive supports for their lifetime, but they have to be under 65 when they apply. You have to be living in Australia and a citizen or a permanent resident. And then you have to meet the disability or the early intervention criteria. And early intervention is usually early access support to help reduce the functional impacts of a person's impairment. And it's targeted at providing supports now so that the impact of the impairment later on down the track is less on a person's functional capacity. And so sorry, I'll just have to move a little bit because our lights turn off. So the disability requirements to get access to the NDIS is that you have to have a disability that is caused by one or more impairments, and the impairment has to be permanent. And so permanent from the NDIS perspective through the legislation is that that all available treatments have to be undertaken that may remedy the impairment. And to remedy means to cure or to substantially relieve. And so when we're thinking about what treatments are available to a person, there was a recent case called Davis where they did decide that a person's financial circumstances and location can be taken into account when considering what treatments a person can actually, in reality, access. And so once a person's impairment has been established as permanent, then you move on to the next hurdle, which is that the impairment has to result in a substantially reduced functional capacity to undertake one or more of communication, social interaction, learning, mobility, self-care, or self-management. And self-management means a person's cognitive capacity to manage their life. So managing their medications, managing their appointments, that cognitive capacity rather than the practical side. And then the person's disability has to affect their social and economic life, and they're likely to require the support of the NDIS for their lifetime. And so once a person has become a participant, they've been accepted into the scheme, then a plan is created. And so for a support to be included in a plan, every single one of these criteria has to be satisfied. So the support has to assist the participant to pursue their goals. It has to help their social and economic participation. It has to be value for money. And when considering that, they consider if there is an alternative support which can achieve the same outcome but at a substantially lower cost. It has to be effective and beneficial, having regard to current good practice, and take into account what is reasonable to expect families, carers, and community to provide. And in terms of what is expected of parents of a child with a disability, the NDIS considers that parents have an obligation to perform a majority of care for their child, even if their child has a disability, but they will fund supports if there is a significantly higher need for care because of that child's disability. And then the last criteria is that it has to be most appropriately funded through the NDIS and not through another system like the health system or the education system. And so the types of supports that the NDIS will fund, I've listed some examples up there at the moment on the slide. And so all the supports have to be related to participants' disability. The NDIS won't fund supports that are related to day-to-day living costs. So, for example, rent or groceries. But they do fund things that may be considered a day-to-day living expense, like something, for example, transport. If because of participants' disability, their needs are significantly higher and they're incurring costs that are directly as a result of their disability. So, for example, someone who is unable to take public transport because of their psychosocial disability, the NDIS can fund them to have transport to and from their medical appointments and to their community activities because they're unable to use public transport. And the other thing that the NDIS won't fund is supports that are likely to cause harm to the participant or pose a risk to others. So they have declined to fund supports for people who might want wheelchairs that have really big engines because they've said that it's a risk of harm to others if they're cruising down the street really fast. And then they don't fund any diagnosis or treatment of any disabilities or medical conditions. And so if a person is unhappy with a decision, they have rights of review. And so the first step is an internal review by the NDIA. And so you have 3 months from the date of the decision to request this internal review. It goes to a special team, and fresh eyes will look at it. So it will be a different delegate in the NDIA who will review the decision. If you're still not happy with the outcome, you then have 28 days to appeal to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, which is an independent tribunal where an independent tribunal member will make a decision about whether or not the support is reasonable and necessary, or whether or not you should get access to the scheme. And so I thought it would be good to talk about some helpful evidence if you're helping your clients. So it's a good idea to get legal advice about the evidence that you might need. That's something that lawyers can be really helpful with. Generally, helpful evidence is structured in a way that actually addresses the legislative criteria. So in NDIS matters, doctors will often write if a person is trying to get access to the scheme, they will say this impairment is permanent. But the NDIS need more than that to be satisfied. So it's more helpful to get the medical practitioner to say that that all the available treatment options have been undertaken by their patient, and that there are no treatment options that are available. Generally as well, it's better to have evidence from specialists. So a GP might be willing to be really helpful, but it's better to have evidence from the actual specialists. And then allied health professionals like OTs are really helpful, and they provide information about a participant's functional capacity, generally through a functional capacity assessment, which is often really helpful in NDIS matters. And then statements of lived experience are written by the client from their perspective, and they can be really persuasive, because the NDIS recognises the nuance of disability and the different experiences of different people with the same or similar disability. So it's an opportunity for your client to kind of provide an insight into their life, and I think that they can be really helpful. And so Legal Aid have a specialist consumer team who help with consumer law matters. And so with the change to the NDIS, NDIS participants are now consumers, and service agreements are contracts. So the Australian consumer law guarantees apply to goods and services funded by the NDIS. So the guarantee to acceptable quality, guarantee as to fitness for purpose, they are guarantees that apply to things like assistive technology that someone has got through their NDIS plan. And then similarly, the consumer law guarantees for services apply. So a guarantee is to due care and skill, and to fitness for a particular purpose of a service that's being provided through the NDIS. So NDIS participants can enforce their consumer rights through the consumer law. And so if you're not happy with the conduct of the NDIA, you can you can complain to the Commonwealth Ombudsman. Firstly, the Commonwealth Ombo generally want you to complain directly to the NDIA, and if it doesn't get resolved, then you can complain to the Commonwealth Ombudsman. But that's in relation to the administrative functions of the National Disability Insurance Agency as a whole. If you're not happy with a service provider that you've engaged through your NDIS plan, then you can complain to the NDIS Quality and Safeguard Commission. And so they perform the functions of approving the registrations of different service providers to provide support through the NDIS, and they manage the complaints about services. And so how can we help? We can give advice to anyone. If someone wants advice about whether or not we think they'd be granted access to the scheme, they can get that advice. We can give specific advice about someone's evidence if they are in a review process. And we can also give them an explanation of the AAT process and what to expect in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. If legal aid is to represent you, we have strict guidelines that are set by the Department of Social Services, who are the NDIS team's funder. So for legal aid to represent clients in the NDIS space, it's not means tested, but you do have to satisfy the criteria that the matter will result in a wider community benefit. So that might mean we're helping you with a decision, but the outcome of that decision is likely to have an impact on a wider number of people, or it will help to iron out an issue we've been seeing a lot happen in this space, or that the person is experiencing significant disadvantage and will likely have a substantial benefit from legal aid. And for both of these, to meet both of these criteria, you also have to have reasonable prospects of success. And I guess the first point of call is law access, which the number is there, and there's a triage system where you'll get through to the right place that you need to go to.
Thanks very much, Stacey. And we'll hand over to Danny now to talk about your story.
Great. Thanks, Britt. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name's Danny Philippa. I'm from Your Story, Disability Legal Support. I'm coming to you from Dharawal land in Wollongong. It's nice and rainy here today. So, yeah, I'll give you a bit of a rundown who we are and how we can help you guys and your clients. So a bit of a background. So we were set up in 2019 as a separate service to assist people engaging with the Disability Royal Commission, which I'm sure you're all aware is wrapped up fairly recently. We're separate to the Royal Commission and we're run out of all the legal aid. So our national service, which I'll talk a bit about later on. But we had two jobs. The first one was to help people who are engaging with the DRC, with the Royal Commission. That was assisting people with submissions, confidentiality, legal things. And then the other issue, or the other part of it, was any other ancillary issues. So obviously, people making submissions to the DRC and Royal Commissions have a lot of reason to do so, a lot of problems attached to that. And so that was kind of the other part of it. With the Royal Commission wrapping up, we've now transitioned into being an entirely focused on disability legal service. So I'll talk through that in a little bit around exactly what we are now. Slide, thank you. The disability, I'll just give you a bit of a rundown of the Disability Royal Commission. The report was released recently. It's an enormous report. I think it's 6,500 odd pages. There are 222 recommendations that have come out of it. Some of them are small recommendations. Some of them are very, very substantive structural ones. And so I can't really run you through all of them, but I encourage you to have a look on the website and have a look around. There are a few summaries going around. The big ones which I wanted to talk to you about, just to note, are that they recommend creating a Disability Rights Act, essentially to sort of bring together a lot of the disparate legislation that exists at the moment, both across the states and territories, but also at a federal level, and also to make everything human rights compliant. Bringing in a disability minister, again, same thing. It's currently, as I'm sure many of you are aware, it's across 3 ministers, sometimes 4 ministers, depending on the issue. You've got social services, you've got the Attorney General's Department, health. There's a range of areas which touch on it, and a lot of these things get lost in that churn. Another big one is removing the comparator test under the Disability Discrimination Act. I won't get into the real nitty-gritty of this, but it does make making claims for discrimination that much harder when you need to have a comparator, someone to compare to. The better supported decision-making across the board for people with disability, and better responses to decision-making. So basically, essentially, it's supposed to be, if some or all of these recommendations are accepted and implemented, a big part of this is implementing a lot of rationalization and bringing things together, because it's quite chaotic across the disability space, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware. There's an incredible number of good recommendations in there. I won't dwell on it too much. We'll wait to see what the government does next. All right, so to talk about your story now. So from the beginning of this year, as the Royal Commission stopped taking submissions at the end of last year, we transitioned into being a specialist disability legal service. We still helped a little bit, but as the years gone on, and particularly now, we are entirely doing disability legal work. As I've said, we're a national service, so we're a part of Legal Aid, so based out of each of the legal aids in each of the states and territory, with a big team being what we call the mobile legal team based in New South Wales. So we're a free and independent legal service. It's a little hard to describe the service. We work across a diverse range of legal areas. The way I describe it to people is that we're a cohort service rather than a topic. So, for example, the employment team does employment law. We focus on people with disability, their carers, supporters, and also sometimes people working with people with disability where appropriate. And so that means that there's a huge range of issues which we will assist with. Predominantly, though, we're civil lawyers in the team. And I'll talk a bit about how we deal with matters where we can't assist in a little bit. So I think on the next slide there. So I'll just give you a rundown of how we work and what the difference is, I guess, from other legal services. So we're a trauma-informed service, and we work very collaboratively with advocates, people within disability communities. We work closely with Blue Knot, which is our counselling service as well, and refer people to that where appropriate. We're obviously an accessible service, and so we will deliver advice or get instructions or help people however that person needs that help. And so we have a no wrong door policy. So however people want to come to us, that's fine. We don't have very strict rules around that. I'll talk to people on the phone, in face-to-face, whatever assistive technology they need, we'll set that up for people. So it's about breaking down as many barriers as possible. There's also other things we do. We tend to have sort of a minimum appointment time of an hour, very, very big on listening to people and trying to give people space. We're very aware that traditional legal services are, particularly in the legal assistance sector, churn through people, but just because there's no resource and a huge unmet need. And so they're very quick appointments, very quick. And often people with disabilities are not heard. The other element which we're very aware of is that people with disabilities are engaging with a large number of government services, private businesses, all kinds of things constantly, and are often constantly being told no or being given sort of, a half answer. So we're very conscious on not just being a service that can assist people as much as we can. Another thing which we're very conscious of in this way is that people with disability often are given the runaround and just referred. So we try to minimize that as much as possible. Now, obviously, we can't do everything for people. And so when we do refer, we try and take a more active approach with referrals. Instead of just saying, oh, look, go here, we will, where appropriate, actively refer people we try and have relationships with the people we refer to. So it's a bit more hands-on in when we do refer, because as I'll talk about in a moment, we can't be across all areas of the law or other areas which aren't in the law as well. So we try and help where we can, and sort of often people will be referred somewhere, it won't be appropriate, and they'll come back to us, and that's okay, we'll try again. So our service takes a flexible approach to that sort of to referrals. I think another important thing to note is the diversity in our team. We have, I don't know exact percentage, but a very large number of us have disabilities. So there's a really strong lived experience within the team, which informs everything that occurs and all the advice we give, which I think makes a very important difference to the service. So I think I'll move to the next slide. So just to give you an understanding of common matters we see and things we can help with, is the top one obviously is discrimination in human rights. That's one we see a lot of. This can be really broad. Discrimination happens in all kinds of ways. It could be from access issues to discrimination in the workplace, which is why I've also got employment and access to services and spaces there. Those could be discrimination matters. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're separate employment matters. Education is another big one we see as well. Access to education is obviously also a discrimination human rights matter, but we also see other issues with breakdowns of communication between parents and schools, unmet need in schools. That's another big area which we can assist with. Housing matters as well, particularly public housing matters not being appropriate, people not being listened to and not being given an appropriate place or being moved around from a place where they really like. That often happens as well. NDIS, now this is a bit different. We don't do what the NDIS team does. We're a bit separate to them, but we'll often assist around NDIS, sometimes with the consumer law type matters, as Stacey was saying earlier. Sometimes it might be giving some general advice and assistance to things, linking people to advocates, that kind of a thing, but we will assist with those things. And sometimes we'll assist clients to engage with the NDIS team. Sometimes we might have complex clients who are very resistant to getting assistance or have had really poor experiences with engaging with services, and so are a bit hesitant to engage with the NDIS team, not because of the NDIS team, but because it's just another service. And so where we have existing relationships, we can have that time. Sometimes we can use that relationship to refer to services within legal aid, such as the NDIS team or other specialist teams, where we've built that relationship. And another one is fines as well. Fines will help. But this is just a taste of some of the things we do. I mean, I can tell you just this morning, I had 3 or 4 completely different matters outside of this. So it's sort of, we don't like to limit it. And as I'll say a few times, if you're ever in doubt, just refer the person to us or send the person to us, because we can work out whether we can assist or not. I should say at this point as well, we have a helpline, a dedicated helpline that clients will call through to. The helpline doesn't really screen people from a point of view of whether or not they should get the service, because the thing with, as I'm sure many of you are aware, with people with disabilities, is often it takes a lot of time for the real issues to come out and to sift through, well, what is legal, what is not, what's the best way forward. And getting back to earlier what I was saying around doing this, what the difference our service has is often someone might have a legal claim, but it's not always the best option to go gung-ho, fight the discrimination or employment matter. There might be a better way forward that's sort of slightly less legal, maybe more negotiated. So we take a very broad approach, and I guess at the end of the day, we're really focused on getting the best outcome for people with disability, whatever that might be. So I just maybe move to the next slide. So I'll just give you some brief case studies. So I can sort of talk about this all day, so I'll try and be brief because there's just so many kinds of matters we do. I'll give you a very quick one about a discrimination matter. So the client had or has autism and PTSD, and he had suffered discrimination in his job and had been sacked, and he'd actually been sacked because of his disability. But the way the sacking was done was quite niche and wasn't the strongest case. Thanks, Bridget. And he hadn't been there for very long. And so having not been there for very long, the other legal services he'd applied, both private and other legal assistance services, said, oh, it's not worth very much. It's not worth the effort. Don't think it's a strong case. We're not going to help you. So he sort of got knocked back, I think 5 or 6 times. Because I was able to sit with him and get the evidence, I was able to determine that there was actually probably a claim there. I would say that it took us 3 sessions. The first 2 times I spoke to him and the information he sent me, I didn't think there was a claim. And I said that was the initial advice. Because of his autism, his ability to communicate isn't amazing. And he takes a lot of questions quite literally. So when I'd ask for specific evidence, I would get literally that 1 page of thing I needed, not if I say, oh, provide me with a contract, he might provide me 1 contract, but not tell me, oh, there are actually others. And so it took a lot of time and working slowly. And the fact we had hour-long appointments, in fact, he could feel comfortable, we could talk and communicate better, it enables us to make that claim. The other thing as well, I think that was difficult with him is that because he's a highly intelligent individual, he needed more time also because he had so many questions and he couldn't move on unless I sort of explained each thing, which other legal services just don't have that time and just maybe see it as a bit, well, why you're questioning me, or this is irrelevant, we're getting off track, and sort of dismiss it. But he just needed to understand what was going on because he's a super smart individual. And so that matter is still sort of ongoing. So we don't have a solution to that one yet, but it's likely he will have a claim for around sort of it's an unfair dismissal, but via discrimination. The other one, next one I want to talk to is around fines. This is something we see that comes up a lot, where clients with disabilities might get inappropriate fines. I had a client recently who has a severe disability brought on by a cancer in her brain. The cancer causes all kinds of hormonal issues, really severe impairments. It's inoperable, so it's treated by quite powerful drugs, which also impact her. She has a disability sticker on her car, and she has also other supports in her life. And I'm helping her with about 6 or 7 different other matters to do with her superannuation. She's going through a divorce. There's a whole range of things going on from this one disability. But one of the ones that keeps coming up is that she keeps getting fines despite displaying the disability sticker, which is annoying, I think, if it was you or I or other people who don't have this disability. But it's so much effort for her to review a fine. It's so much effort for her to have to send emails. She has good days and bad days. I'll go for weeks without hearing from her, and then I'll get everything on a few days where things are functioning. And so I'm able to sort of help. We've waived a couple of the fines so far that have come up because she was parked legally, but for example, she didn't have to pay parking fees because she had the sticker. She was parked in a disability spot. They still fined her. So those kind of things, whilst are quite small and low level to perhaps some of our other legal aid clients, people with disabilities, it can be entirely too much. And she basically said that she was prepared to just sort of pay the fines and just to make them go away, which is, again, it's not an outcome we want. She's recently lost her job because of this. She doesn't have the income to just be paying fines to make a problem go away. So we can assist with things like that. Got a little bit of time. Another one we do, which I guess doesn't get discussed a lot, is assisting with prisoners. Prisoners are a cohort. Prisoners with disability are a really vulnerable cohort. I'm not sure how many people have worked in prisons. I sort of go in them occasionally, but people within prison, obviously it's a hierarchy. If you have a disability, particularly a physical disability, mental disability, something visible, you can be a target by other prisoners and by guards. And so people can be stood over. It's a real issue. It's a very, very vulnerable place. Prisons, obviously, particularly in New South Wales, control information as well. So it can be very hard to assist prisoners because we just don't know what's going on. But the sort of matters we do assist with, and some of my colleagues have had some success with, we've had some clients who had diabetes, and the prison medical authorities were not providing diabetes medication, which is obviously a breach of human rights, but also can kill people ultimately and shorten people's lives. So really, really serious things of that nature. And So we can assist with things like that, engaging with the prison health services. So it's very, very broad what we do. Some of the areas we don't help, where we can refer out, are things that legal aid doesn't assist in. So things like personal injury, wills and estates, those are the areas which legal aid doesn't assist. But we have relationships, particularly with personal injury, with a number of personal injury firms, which I'll refer to regularly, that we know we've dealt with in the past. There's a number of issues, like, for example, we don't have a strong expertise of criminal law in the practice, but because we're part of legal aid, we have existing relationships with the criminal practice. We can assist there. And in that job, we might not be so much providing direct legal advice, but being that bridge, because often the disabilities get lost. The person with disability has to explain it so many times. So they just give the cliff notes, and then the new criminal lawyer doesn't fully have the full picture. So we're able to sort of facilitate some of those things as well, which I think it's hard to measure the impact of those things. It's not as clear cut as here's a client with problem, I help them get rid of fine. But I think it's just as important and the sort of thing that the service does, because it just makes all that administrative stuff easier for people with disabilities. So I think I'll leave it there for case studies to leave some time for questions, because I really could just keep talking about them all day. But we welcome referrals always. So you can get in touch with us a number of ways. We've got a helpline, a dedicated helpline. The call centre is based out of Legal Aid Queensland. And so that's the number that's there on the screen for that. Always happy to have a chat. You can also email us directly about things within the team. So there's an email address, and we have a website. And also you can probably get to us via Legal Aid New South Wales. So if you went via the Legal Aid traditional channels, you'll find us as well, because we're out of the same offices and things. So there's a number of ways to get to us. I'm conscious that I think some of the audience might have clients themselves or questions yourself. So you can have clients directly send them to us. You can come with the client and be part of the call and where appropriate. There might be times where it's not appropriate, but broadly we have obviously no issues with supportive social workers and others being part of it. And then also, if you have questions yourselves, we're more than happy to talk to people about those issues. We can also help with bigger picture things. So we'll go out to places where supports services, provide trainings, talks, that kind of thing as well. So very much open to all of that. I think that was all I really wanted to give you a rundown for. So I think there's going to be questions now. Is that right, Bridget? Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. So one question was why the client that you spoke about was being fined when she had a sticker. I don't know if you got an answer to that.
Well, I'd love to know the answer to that. I don't know. It keeps happening to her, and they take photos of the car. I don't know if you've ever seen how fines work, and I can see the picture. I can see the sticker in their photo. So, and the fines get waived. So, great question. Don't know. Really frustrating. The real answer, not to be too in it, is that, to be frank, I mean, we live in a fairly ableist society, and there's still a lot of progress to be made around making our society more broadly accessible for people with disabilities, which is why I hope some of what comes out of the Royal Commission is implemented. That's the sort of bigger picture answer to that question. For my client specifically, I just don't. It's very frustrating.
I can imagine, and it must just impose such an extra level of hardship to a life that sounds like is very difficult already. And it's great that your service can assist her with those fines. Another question, whether you can assist when someone's experiencing financial abuse if there's no AVO.
Good question. I certainly wouldn't. So that's the sort of thing this is where it's very diverse. I certainly wouldn't say no, we can't assist with that. We'd have to look at the facts of the matter and look at the full referral. It may be a case that a referral needs to be made to, if it's a domestic violence situation. If it's a sort of a person with disability, let's just say, for example, an intellectual disability, family members are taking money that person should be getting, say, from NDIS or DSP. Yeah, that'd be the sort of thing we could look to assist with. the thing with the kind of work we do, it's very fact dependent because everyone's scenarios is so different. Obviously, there are so many types of disability. There's so many different issues within different disability communities. So yeah, I don't really want to ever limit to say, oh, we won't do this or won't do that. But that scenario, even though it sounds quite specific, I'd probably need more info, just because, yeah, it depends. It really depends, but it definitely would be something we would look at and would be seeking to help with. Financial abuse of people with disabilities, particularly people who are very vulnerable due to intellectual disabilities, maybe very significant physical disabilities. There could also be intersectional issues, so substance abuse or histories of domestic violence, complex PTSD, which is a disability in of itself. These things can all come together to make people really vulnerable for abuse, for scams. I don't know if there's a little big push around scams at the moment. So yeah, all of those things we would absolutely take a look at and want to assist with. Without saying it, I can't give you a yes, no, like exactly what we would do, but absolutely, that'd be something we'd want to assist with.
I wasn't aware that you were helping clients in prison as well. So obviously the service is extremely broad, and I imagine you work in conjunction with the Legal Aid Prisoners Legal Service at times as well.
Yeah, so we basically, we work closely with all, like a huge parts of legal aid. So yeah, PLS, we will refer to PLS occasionally for them to take on clients, but I'll also get help from them to just get their advice as well. So we're very like we said, the goal is what's best for the client and people with disabilities. So if there's someone who's better placed, better expertise, there's no sort of ego on the part of our team. We will go where it needs to be best. And so, yeah, we'll help sometimes people with prisoners with that. I had a client a little while ago who had extensive help with PLS, had come through to us because we have a dedicated phone line in New South Wales prisons. The other states and territories, it's a mixed bag, whether we've got our phone number in the prisons, but ours is there. So sometimes prisoners will have help with PLS, but then get through to us as well. And then it might be appropriate that the person from PLS keeps assisting. I've had other ones where it's gone the other way, where the PLS person has said, well, no, actually, you've got the continued relationship. So, yeah. I mean, there's more work than anyone could ever possibly achieve. So no one's really fighting over trying to steal from one another.
No, that's right. And I'm also aware that the human rights team are working, have the project working on access to health for prisoners as well. So I'm sure there's some intersectionality there with your team as well.
Yeah.
I noticed that Kerry had a hand raised, but unfortunately our webinar program doesn't allow us to have questions posed verbally. So if you're able, it would be great if you could put your question in the Q&A box. And if that's not possible for you during the live webinar, then if someone can provide that to us by email after the webinar, then we'll forward the question on and ask and get a response for you.
I just actually just add something just briefly,
to
keep in mind. With discrimination matters, absolutely love to have discrimination matters. We also have the specialist human rights team who does a huge amount of discrimination. But I believe, and I don't have the exact stat off the top of my head, that some 70% of all of the Australian Human Rights Commission's matters are disability discrimination at the moment. So just to give you an understanding of the scale of what is out there, and from our sort of experience in community outreach, there's huge unmet need. Certain cohorts, certain groups are just getting no assistance. So we're very much always looking for any referrals to those areas, because we know there's huge unmet need and we know there's a huge issue there. So yeah, just I guess keeping that in mind is the point.
They're shocking, very shocking statistics, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't have the exact one off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but it's something in that order. Yeah.
We've got a question from Kim as to whether your story can provide assistance to individuals and families in social housing facing eviction due to rental arrears.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can assist with. sometimes there's definitely been times when we've referred that to the specialist housing team in New South Wales where it's been better placed with them. But having said that, a colleague of mine, Jack, has got a matter with housing at the moment that he's assisting someone with. Another colleague of mine, Anton, he had a housing matter the other day around inappropriate, so needed modifications to the property, wasn't done appropriately. I had a client last week where the person needed repairs, and in the course of that repairs, they were going to evict the person for 5 or 6 weeks, going to put them in a place that was inaccessible for their needs. So yeah, housing is a big part of it. But again, it's like if there's a better place for the client and they're going to get a better service, or we think it's more appropriate, say with the specialist team, we'll refer them there, actively refer them there and assess that. But yes, so if someone's getting evicted, that's definitely something we'd want to look at, because there may be things that can be done, particularly with social housing, particularly for a disability. It might just be that disability wasn't made aware. There could be a range of issues there. Housing obviously has a churn issue where there's so much. I think the waiting lists for some people are 10 years for some housing. So they're always trying to kick people out to get people in to say, oh, look, we're placing people. And so, yeah, it can be just pointing out, oh, well, look, you're actually going to displace very vulnerable people. So sometimes that's appropriate. But yep, we would definitely be interested if you referred that. Yeah.
And the number, I'll just go back to the slide with the number. That's a national number, is that right, Danny?
Yeah. Yep. National number. So they're based out of Queensland. That's where the call centre is. But yes, it's a national service. And so that's the other thing as well. Being a national service is quite useful because it's good for national law. So areas of law that cross state boundaries. So for example, NDIS, federal discrimination law, employment law. I have clients who are in WA because they had overflow because the jurisdictions usually have 1 or 2 lawyers in them. So it's very broad in that sense. So the New South Wales team can support the jurisdictions, and vice versa. We can sort of say, for example, with Victoria, and say, hey, look, I've actually got a client that's in your jurisdiction that's come to us. Sometimes people with mental health orders or mental health conditions might cross state boundaries, and there might be issues. So yeah, it's important. Again, it sounds like I'm talking very broadly and generally because disability is so broad. It's depending on the statistics, some 20% of people in Australia have a disability. So yeah, I'm talking very broadly because it is very broadly. But to give one example, medications for a lot of disabilities are state-based, so controlled by state legislation. If one person moves from one state to another, the regime they're under for medication can change, and then can be bureaucratic sort of nightmare to get medication, particularly for controlled substances. So thinking psychoactive medication, drugs for ADHD, antipsychotics, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that it's why it's useful having a national service, but it's also I guess why our service has a national focus, because these issues don't sort of stop at the New South Wales border.
Yeah, of course. And Stacey, for your team, the best avenue or pathway for people to get access is to contact the Law Access number?
Yes, that's right. So my team specifically helps when you're at the Administrative Appeals Tribunal stage, or if there's something kind of complex or tricky, and then a local legal aid office or might help if you want some advice around getting access to the NDIS. So the best way to do it is to call the Law Access number that's on the screen, and they will point you in the right direction.
Thank you. So we don't have any further questions at this stage. Just to let people know that the webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded onto the Legal Aid New South Wales YouTube channel in the next few days. So if you weren't able to attend, or if you'd like to review it again, then you'll find the recording there. And if you do happen to watch this as a recording and you have questions, you can still have those answered by emailing sealy-branch@legalaid.newsouthwales.gov.au, and we'll forward them to the appropriate service so that you can have your question answered. So thank you, Stacey and Danny. I've learnt a lot about our services that I wasn't aware of. So it's been really informative, and I'm sure that the audience, there were some comments saying that it was a brilliant presentation from both of you. Great information for us to be able to share. So I thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you both again, and I'll close off the webinar now.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. See ya.